Hello everyone, welcome back to the second video in the series where we're making Meteor Galaxy. In this video I'm going to show you how web images work and how you can load them in your project and make sure that they're actually loaded so that you won't end up with any blank sprites on the screen. Alright, let's get right into it. So right here I have the Meteor Galaxy game up that we worked on in the last video. And to start out with, we don't need the circle. That was more of an example thing from the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the circle code. I'm going to take out this timer, so we'll have an empty start function. And we can keep the move method or function right here. Sometimes you'll hear these called functions, sometimes methods. Other languages tend to call them methods, but in JavaScript they call them functions. So you might hear me say methods sometimes. But anyways, we can take out the circle line since we no longer have that circle variable, but some of this right here will be useful later. So I'm going to rename this to move ship since it'll be moving the spaceship around later, but we're just going to set this aside and use it in a later video. And I'll get rid of the moves, or here, I'll move the move speed up to the top for now. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add in a web image. I'm going to put a title on the canvas. And so first I'll declare a variable called web image. So variable web image equals new web image. And for web images, you give it a URL. So I'm going to grab the URL that I have for the title. You put it in as a string, and then web image dot set position. All right, go ahead and run this. And what you'll notice here is I had to click that run code button twice to get it to go in to get drawn to the canvas, and that's a problem. Well, it's not the end of the world to click it twice, but it'd be a lot better if it just worked the first try. And so I'm gonna explain why that is. So since this is a web image, it has to load the image from the URL you give it, and so when you try to use it right away, it might not be loaded, and so that's why you might end up with missing images on the screen. And you'll also notice another thing. That looks like I was putting it in the center, but the origin of the sprite is in the top left corner. So meaning when you set the position of the web image, it'll be the top left corner of the web image. And so I'm going to show you a bit later how to write a quick function that'll help you center web images and other sprites. Alright, so now I'm going to look at how we're going to fix this issue of the web images not loading. So what we need to do is make sure that all the web images are loaded before we start the game. If you're working on a larger project, of course you could just make sure the ones you're using first are loaded and then load the rest in the background. But since I'm not going to use too many web images, I'm going to go ahead and write this code so that I make sure they're all loaded before the game starts. So I'm going to show you a way that you can organize your web images. On the right, you'll see on the documentation that they give you, they show you maps and objects. So right here, you can see there's an object, and you have these properties of the object, so name and color, and you can put different values into there. And essentially what you have are like variables within the object. So the object is grouping them together and making them easily accessible. So that's what I'm going to do to store some objects, web image objects. So I'll go ahead and declare a new object called object map equals, and then you do open bracket, close bracket with a semicolon. Next, I'm gonna put in some different properties. So the first one is gonna be title, and this will hold the a web image that uses the URL for the title image. So I'm gonna declare a new web image here just by writing new web image, and then I'll just copy the same URL right here and put this on the new web image. So now we have our first image inside of the object map. Next, we need to make sure that it's loaded. So I'm going to write two methods that deal with loading the images. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out of the start function. And I'm going to write a new function. And then this one I'm going to call load images. So the first thing that we need to do is loop through this object. Right now there's only one thing in the object, but we're going to have multiple things. And actually I'll go ahead and add another one just so that I can show you what's happening. So I'm going to put this one called ship here, and that'll be the spaceship. And then inside of load images, first we need to loop through the object map, and then we're going to call a load method on these. So what the load method does, I'll show you. Like here, if we're going to access the title object here, we do object.title.load. And this load method, what you give it is a callback function. So I'm going to write another function right here called loaded callback. So this is what I'm going to give the this loaded method right here. When this title object gets loaded, it will call the callback method, so loaded callback right here. So that way we're going to use this to tally up each object that gets loaded. So the next thing I'm going to do is declare a couple of variables. So I'm going to do one that's going to be a constant. So I'm going to use uppercase for that to indicate it's a constant. And this will be number of images. And then I'll set that equal to the length of this object map. Now here's something I want to do. I could go ahead and just write 2 because we have 2 objects in the object map. But there's a better way to do this so that it dynamically changes based on how many objects you have in the object map so that you don't have to worry about updating it later. I wanted to know how to do this, and I referenced a site called Stack Overflow. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have not. And it's this awesome site where programmers ask questions and people answer each other's questions. And you can even look at just already answered questions because a lot of people might have the same question that you do. So here is an example of how to get the size of an object. So it's the amount of keys within an object. And I wanted to understand it better, so I found on this site, it's developer.mozilla.org, and they have the JavaScript documentation, and it's awesome reference. And they even have an example right here of using this object.keys. What the object.keys does is for each key right here, so there's A, B, and C, it puts them into an array. As gives you the name of them. So if you run this, you'll get A, B, and C. But what I want is how many of these properties are in the object. And so all you need to do is add dot length, and then that's getting the length of the array back. So if you run this, you'll get 3, and there's 3 properties right here. So I'm going to go ahead and use that in my code right here. So I'm going to modify number of images. We're going to say object dot keys, and then object map, and then dot length. So that will get the array that contains all the keys. So in this case, I'll have title and ship, and then it'll get the length of that array. So at the moment, that would be 2. All right, the next thing we need to do is loop over each of the images and then set the loaded callback function. So I'm going to use a loop, they call it a for in loop. So I'm going to declare a new variable object, and then it's going to be in the object map, like that. So what this will do is it'll iterate through the object map, and then the different keys will be right here. So actually keys would be a better name or key for that. And so that'll give you each key. So first title, and then ship, and then whatever other ones you add. And then I'll go ahead and do object map, and then dot, or actually I'll just use the square brackets to access the correct key. So the current key that's right here, and then dot load, because we're going to use the callback method on the key. And then inside of here, I'm going to put loaded callback. So quick review on this. This is iterating through the object map. You get the different keys in this key variable. So first it'll use title and then ship. Right here we're using this key we're accessing the key in the object map. So this would give us the web image. And then on that web image, we're calling the load function and setting loaded callback as the callback. So we'll call loaded callback once the image is loaded. The next thing we need to do is add another variable called number of loaded images, and that will be equal to 0 at the start since none of them have been loaded. But on the loaded callback, the first thing we can do is number of loaded images plus. So we'll add 1 to the loaded image since it's calling the callback method, so it means it's been loaded. Next thing we need to do is know, I put this code right here inside the start function. I'm going to move it over to the load images, and then call load images inside the start function. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is once we load all the images, we need to start the game. So in order to know if we've loaded them all, we're going to use an if statement. So if the number of loaded images is greater than or equal to the number of images, then we'll call the next method that will that'll start the game. So right here I used the greater than or equal sign. I could just say equals, but since it's definitely, if I know it goes greater, I know I've loaded enough images, and if something happened and it got called twice, it's just a little safeguard there. Next thing we need to do is have another method to call that'll start the game. And what I'm going to do is have a function called game manager. And we're not really going to put that much in it at the moment. It's more for later. But inside of here, we're going to set a new timer. And it'll call game manager every 20 milliseconds. All right, so this function later is going to handle our whole game. So it's going to kind of be at the top of the hierarchy, and it'll call all the other methods that then call the more specific methods to run the game. So the other thing I'm going to do to be safe is have a loaded variable. So variable loaded equals false. And then right here, I'm going to say loaded equals true. So right here, we know we've loaded all the images. And then right here, I'm going to say and not loaded. So that way, once loaded is true, well, that makes sure that the set timer is not called again. And the last thing before I run this, I'm going to put in some print line statements just so that we can see how the images are loading. So right here, I'm going to print line and then say loading images. And then on the callback, I'm going to do another print line. And then I'm going to put the number of loaded images plus image or images plural loaded. And then right here, I'm going to print load load success. So that way we can see that all the images are loaded. So I just wrote a bunch of code. Let's run it and see how it works. Oh, it looks like we got a little error. So I found my mistake right here. I looked back at the code that I written before, and I got this method wrong. So it's actually this function should be loaded, not load, and so it's the loaded function that gets called when the web image is loaded. And I said num images, and right here I said number of images. So I'm just gonna shorten that right here. Let's run that, and you'll see it was able to load all the images. Now let's try drawing these to the canvas. So the first thing I'm gonna do is show you how to resize the canvas. So I'm gonna do this at the very start of the program, and I do this, I think it's a good practice because it gets run first, and that means that if you have any constants that are based on off of the screen width or the screen height, those will be correct. Because if you base all your constants on off of a smaller screen, then when you make the screen larger, if you're trying to center things, they'll be closer to the top left corner than they should be. So all you need to do to set the canvas size is say set size, and then I'm gonna do let's see, 650 by 450 to get started, and later on I'll put this in a comment. I'm gonna do set size, and then I'm gonna do 720 by 450, so, or 720 by 480. And so right now, since I'm on a smaller screen, making it 650 by 450 will give me a little bit more space to work. Plus right here there's a scroll bar, and so when I use the arrow keys it tends to move up and down, so it makes it harder to test. And then later, if you'd like to share the project, it gives you a bit more space, so you can make it a bit bigger with I'll uncomment that line right there. So if we run that, you can see we have a larger canvas, so a lot more space to work with there. And then next, what I'm going to do is show you how to write the function to center objects on the screen. So let's do function set position centered. I'm going to give a few more lines just so that I can put it up higher. Okay, now we're going to need to take in a few parameters. So those will be the shape, the X position, and the Y. So what this will do is, since right now you set the position of a web image by setting the upper left corner, but for most of the cases I'm going to be doing, it's more convenient to set the position of the center of the web image. So to do that, I'll show you. We're going to use the set position method. So I'm going to do shape dot set position, and then X minus shape dot get width divided by 2, and then Y minus shape dot get height divided by 2. So what this is doing is, since it's on the top left corner, it'll shift it over halfway to the left and then shift it halfway up, so that way it will put the center, or the coordinate you give it will be the center of the sprite. Okay, next let's test it out. So after the images are loaded, I'm gonna do actually I'm gonna uncomment this timer for now, and I'm just gonna do a test draw method. So this is just gonna test out our code. And I'm gonna draw these sprites to the screen. So we have the title and the ship. So right here you can see their objects declared inside of this object map, and like I did before, you can access them by doing object map and then dot and then the key. So I'll do dot title and dot ship, and that will access this web image. Since they're already declared right here, I don't need to declare a new one. So on test draw, I'm going to do object map dot ship dot set position, get width divided by 2, get height divided by 2. And we want to use the set position centered method actually that we just wrote, and then add object map dot ship, and then we're going to do the same for the title. Oh, one thing I'd like to mention, you have to get used to this when you write your own method. I accidentally did object map dot ship dot set position centered, but this set position centered method that we just wrote doesn't work like that. You actually have to put it inside of the arguments or parameters right here, and this is because the set position centered is inside of our code right here. It's not inside of the web image class. So this is written by us, not by CodeHS. So I just need to move these two objects inside of the parameters. I need to add the title to this one. There. So we got the ship and we got the title. And actually, if we want to put that at the top, can do that. There we go. Meteor Galaxy and the ship. It's starting to look a little bit like the game. Alright, the last thing I'm going to show you how to do is set the color of the canvas. I'm just going to do this in the start function, and since this game is in space, I'm just going to set the color to black. So you just type set background color, and then you type color dot black. So I'll go ahead and run that. You see we have the title, Meteor Galaxy, we got the spaceship, and it works on the first run, so because it loads the images in each time. So if I refresh this page and then run it again, you'll see there's a little bit more delay in the loading images since it's loading them in the first time. The second time, since it already has them loaded in, it goes fast. Now that's a way you can ensure that the images are loaded before you start the game so that you don't have any disappearing images. Alright, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, this will progress and get more and more like the final product, so there's a lot of cool things ahead. So I hope you stick with it and have a great day. Bye.